It's been a tiny bit since I last uploaded. Sure, maybe in that time I graduated college, got into grad school, moved across the country, and got a job, but none of that is important enough to have delayed making another video. No, what prevented me from making another video was far simpler than any of that. Mechanical keyboards have gotten boring. Kind of. Maybe it's a bit more accurate to say that I achieved just about everything I really wanted to achieve in building keyboards for myself. I had found the keyboards that most interested me, bought them, threw switches and keycaps in them, and called it a day. And despite scouring the forums, I felt like every new keyboard that got announced wasn't all that interesting to me. Oh wow, another 60 or 65% gasket mount. Wow, you put how much foam in it? Wow, this keyboard comes in black and white. At the end of the day, I already had a 60 to 65% gasket mount. I've put foam in every single one of my keyboards and then taken it out of every single one. And the color options that are usually available are either really gaudy or horrifyingly generic. On top of that, it only takes a couple hours to put together hundreds of dollars worth of parts, and when the build was done, that was it. What, you want me to use this thing? I'm a Mac guy. It took no time to realize that this hobby was fun for me because of the process. Outside of my limited preferences, I didn't really care all that much about what keyboard I was building, I just liked doing it. But it's a pretty expensive way to spend only a few hours, and considering I haven't learned to type with my feet, the benefit of having more keyboards is limited. I had two problems. One was that nothing seemed interesting to me, and the other was that even if I did find something interesting, the dopamine rush that I desperately need is so expensive and only lasts for so long. And then I stumbled upon the Orange Boy Ergo from MechWild. For a fraction of the price of its own case, which you can handily purchase from the Persona 3 dancing store, you receive a full arisu-style keyboard kit. I mean, seriously, the max price on this thing is $50. The catch? Unironically, this solved all of my problems. It's inexpensive, it's unique to me since I've never used an Alice/Arisu/Ergo keyboard, and the process inevitably will take more time since you're soldering both the switches and the diodes to the PCB. I slammed the purchase button, typed my very sensitive payment information into a website I found like 2 seconds ago, and waited patiently. I was actually missing the switch plate I had ordered when it came in the mail, but honestly, I was way too excited about building it to care all that much. I did reach out to MechWild, and while they took a little bit to reply, they sent the plate over without a second thought. It was probably the easiest customer service experience I can remember, so thank you MechWilders for MechWilding your way into my heart. Oh my god, I cannot believe... Actually, I can believe I wrote that. That's good. I like that. By the time that the switch plate arrived, though, I'd already built the whole kit. I outfitted it with some J-Wick Ultimate Blacks, which ended up being too wobbly for my taste. And since I forgot to order stabilizers, I cannibalized my Portico 75. The build guide MechWild provides is fantastic. It has all the information you need without getting too wordy, and for someone like me who can't read, the pictures are great. Recently, I took it apart to add the switch plate and replace the J-Wicks with Gateron Yellows, which are probably my favorite switch when considering price. And here it is. I mentioned how great the guide is, and I wish I had bothered to pull it back up when putting this back together because I had a bitch of a time trying to get the screws between the switch plate and the PCB, which you're meant to do before soldering the switches. Here's the price and details of my spec placed against similar Ergo options that I found. While I do want to mention my thoughts on this keyboard, I'll keep it pretty surface level because this is probably not meant to be your daily driver. It's more meant to be a keyboard that you use to test out whether an Ergo style is right for you or not. It took me a bit of time to adjust to the Arisu layout when I first tried it. Not more than half an hour or so, but it was still a weird experience. Nowadays though, I can switch between this and a standard layout without too much of a hiccup. Speaking of the layout though, I really do love the two B keys. I type like an ape, so I'm glad that I can use either hand to hit the B key. The typing feel is pretty hard, and I don't really know what kind of mounting mechanism you'd call this. With the switch plate, the board has a tiny bit less flex than it did without the plate, but it's pretty negligible since the standoffs are spaced apart just right to reduce flex. Acoustically, it's definitely also pretty weird. Probably due mostly to the thin keycaps I'm using, it has a clacky sound, which I tend to prefer over the really stupid Thok meta. I can very easily see how people would much prefer something like the Keychron for this price. It comes fully built for the same price or even cheaper than this kit and all its parts. The Keychron also has RGB and is hot swappable, whereas you'd have to solder in hot swap sockets on the Orange Boy Ergo to make it hot swappable. So in full, an option like the Keychron is just less work for potentially the same result. but for someone like me, I'd choose the OBE over the Keychron any day. Yes, it was more expensive and I had to put in a lot more work, and yes, the damn thing does not have a case, but I had fun with it. I practiced a skill I wouldn't have practiced otherwise, and I have a much better feeling of I built that when I placed the OBE on my shelf. This is my keyboard. All the soldering mistakes, the poorly trimmed component legs, and the scratches on the switch plate from trying to retroactively force the screws in after I had soldered the switches down, those mistakes are mine, and I can easily see them anytime I want since there's no case in the way. Mine doesn't have a stabilizer on the left spacebar, partially because I don't really use it, partially because it doesn't really need it, and partially because I ran out of stabs in that size. For me, the experience of building this keyboard was part of the payoff, not the hurdle. And besides, it has a cat on the back of it.